Destination of the Northern Emirates.
Right, let's talk banks now. Earnings season for 2024 is coming to a close. We've heard from most of the big major banks, joined now by Asad Ahmed, Managing Director at Alvarez and Marsal, the consultancy. He covers the financial sector. Asad, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Richard. I am well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's talk about, first of all, FAB, the biggest bank in the country, based in Abu Dhabi. We had earnings from them late last week. Decent set of earnings, 4% rise in full-year net profit, beating estimates, but not as good as many of the banks, which reported 20-30% increase in their profits for the year. How are you reading this one?
So, FAB and Emirates NBD, the two largest banks in the country. FAB is the largest by balance sheet side, as you rightly say. They're largely a corporate bank. Their main earning drivers are from the investment income and corporate interest income. And they're in challenging markets as well. But I think it's still a very good set of results from them, by and large. Emirates, on the other hand, greater net profit in terms of numbers, and also better return on equity.
But it's the smaller banks that have really knocked it out of the park. We look at the likes, ADCB is not a small bank. RAK Bank, we spoke to the CEO, Rahil Ahmed. These banks are reporting 20-30% increases in profitability. What's different?
Well, I think they come off a smaller base. The market last year has been very strong. The smaller banks are agile, and some of them have done extremely well. And added numbers have also been good. And ADCB, they were up, I think, almost about 22%. So they have moved faster. They've been nimbler in repositioning themselves. And I think you will see some of them, and we haven't seen DIB's numbers yet. They're supposed to come out today, but you will see some of them actually now getting into the, if you like, the double-digit billion range in profitability this year.
Overall, it's been a very good set of numbers for UAE banks, hasn't it? There's no other way to describe it. They've done really, really well. But in terms of growth, the UAE is still a relatively small country, population of 10-ish million people. Saudi Arabia, where you are today, is a market that they're all eyeing. But how realistic is it to penetrate the Saudi market, which has many very good Saudi banks and many good international banks?
Absolutely. You make a good point, and absolutely correct. This market also, in some ways, in some analysis, people are beginning to consider as overbanked. There's a big difference in the liquidity component within the markets here. The banks in the UAE sort of work on a loans to deposit ratio of about the mid-70s. In Saudi, we're looking at between 95-99%. So, and you'll have seen during the current month and a half, the number of bond issues that have come out. So I think there is, and given the vision here of 2030 in Riyadh, there is a lot of opportunity for banks for outside banks or international banks to play a role. But it hasn't been easy.
In terms of other international expansion for the UAE banks, Turkey is an area that a lot of them are looking at. I read in the Mashreq earnings report that they're very excited about what they're doing in Pakistan and India, and even further afield in Hong Kong. Heading east for UAE banks, what are the pros and cons of doing that?
So heading east is relatively near, I think. Of course, FAB has offices in Singapore, etc. And I think that for Mashreq in Pakistan was the digital proposition that makes sense. But banks have traditionally looked at, as you said, Turkey and Egypt, and expansion there too continues to grow. And I think that there's still room there. The markets there are much larger, and the trade flows are very strong. By and large, banks follow their customers, and as the trade flows between here and the east grow, yes, there is a view to see how to follow your customer.
What are the risks that you see, Asad, for the banks here in the UAE? We know strong growth is great in a booming economy, and that's what we've got at the moment. But you've been in banking a long time. You know the risks of rapid growth in booming economies, don't you? How do you characterize those risks?
So the good thing is that there is growth, but this time it seems a little bit more sustainable, and there is considerable amount of FDI coming in. UAE has been, I think, number one in FDI for economies of the same size. But yes, there is always risk in terms of large growth. But I think that the opportunities for the banks to make sustainable earnings seems much stronger today than perhaps in the last economic cycle.
Are you worried at all about exposure to the real estate and construction sectors among UAE banks?
So I look at that closely. This year, I was looking at the numbers for 2024. By and large, the larger banks have made a very consistent exposure to the real estate market. In fact, some of the numbers have come down. Some of the smaller banks still have a relatively high exposure compared to the rest of the portfolio. But I think that I'm also encouraged by the numbers in terms of the mortgage take-up. I'm encouraged by the numbers of transactions that are happening, real transactions, the number of people coming into the country. So right now, as I stand today, not too concerned, but I'd like to see maybe next quarter. But for the moment, I think what is more concerned to me that the UAE's economy is now much more integrated globally, and your colleague was mentioned, the comment about aluminum. So I think the integrated economy within the international markets, and I think the what's happening internationally, that is perhaps a little bit more to watch.
Finally, what about the prospects for any big takeovers in 2025? The rumours or stories about FAB making a bid for Standard Chartered, they seem to have died down, but not completely gone away. Do you see any kind of transformative M&A, either a UAE bank buying overseas or within the UAE banking sector?
So, as I mentioned before, I sadly don't have a crystal ball, but I'm sure there is a conversation going on somewhere. It would seem a good thing to be on the board agenda, especially for the larger banks.
Asad, as always, really appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, getting up early, joining us live from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. The thoughts there of Asad Ahmed, Managing Director of the consultancy Alvarez and Marsal, and also, we should point out, former General Manager of the National Bank of Fujairah, a very experienced banker.